Good evening, everybody. If you don't know me, I'm Rosalind Wade Haddon, the chair of the trustees. I've taken over from Dr. Paul Collins, who served us for, oh gosh, 7+ years. But so it's a very hard act, hard, difficult shoes to fit. But anyway, I will do my best. And it's with great pleasure this evening to introduce Maysoon Al Damluji, who is an architect who trained at the Architectural Association in London, specializing in the conservation of traditional heritage buildings, at the same time running a busy London practice. However, in 2003, she returned to Iraq and served as Iraqi Deputy Minister of Culture between 2003 to 6, and as a member of the Iraqi Parliament for 3 terms between 2006 to 18, and as chairman of the Parliamentary Committee for Culture and Media. She also served as cultural advisor to the President of Iraq, His Excellency Barham Salih, between 2019 and 22. Maysoon now dedicates much of her time focused on researching cultural issues and women's rights in Iraq. She is also one of BC's 2 patrons, and she is an invaluable link for us with the State Board of Antiquities and other government departments, always giving us sage advice and kindly facilitating contacts with the necessary authorities. She has published a number of articles, both in Arabic and English, including one titled Babylon's Long Return to Iraq, in a volume published by Chatham House last year, namely Iraq 20 Years On. She is author of Manhutat Baghdad, Sculptures of Baghdad, a study of public monuments as a means for reviving national identity during conflicts, and was the editor-in-chief of Noon between 2004 to 18, which is an Iraqi monthly magazine for women concerned with promoting women's creativity in the arts and literature. She serves to remind us that we should always look at how public art reflects political movements and how creativity has a long and enduring history within Iraq. Maysoon will talk in a second. If you have any questions, there'll be a Q&A session at the end, and just write your questions into the Q&A box on the right-hand side at the bottom. Okay, now I'll hand you over to Maysoon, and we'll have this, I'm sure, fascinating account of Baghdad sculptures. Maysoon, over to you.
Thank you very, very much, Rosalind. I need to figure this out. I need to share screen. Ah, there it is.
Perfect. I'll sign off for now for myself.
Thank you. So, de-Baathification of art in Baghdad. Oh, the slides are not moving. Okay. I start with a quotation by Eric Michael Rose, historian, who says, "Memory is a battlefield, and monuments are built on this contested ground. They are fronts on political theaters of war, sites where vying factions negotiate history, a society's identity, and consequently its political future. Victors often erect monuments, memorializing the heroes of their conquests, working to promote stories about the past that legitimize their authority. Power, though, tends to invite challenge. Those who do not share the political visions inherent in such shrines sometimes engage in iconoclasm, altering or destroying monuments. And this is exactly what happened in Baghdad after 2003. And before, it wasn't the first time, as we will see. It wasn't the first time we witnessed iconoclasm. Since the invasion of Iraq in 2003, Baghdad has witnessed a fundamental transition in state identity and scope, which was reflected on public icons and monuments, especially those seen to be associated with the fallen regime, or with a narrative that is in conflict with prevailing political visions. Chaos and unclear directives of de-Baathification opened the path to many interpretations of sculptures made during Saddam's era and led to the destruction of more artwork than necessary. On the other hand, a number of monuments that are directly linked to Saddam's Ba'ath Party have found a reason to survive and be part of emerging state symbolisms. This paper will explore the transformation of art in public space due to de-Baathification law and other determinants after 2003, examining the aftermath and new state and societal icons that have replaced fallen statues and symbols. I will go briefly over public sculptures and monuments in Baghdad. Soon after the formation of the Iraqi state in 1921, an equestrian statue of General Stanley Maud was erected in Baghdad. Top left photo. Maud was the commander of the British Army that defeated the Ottomans in 1917, only to die of cholera shortly afterwards. He's buried in Baghdad, actually. It was the first statue to be installed in a public space in Baghdad, yet the Baghdadi society, consisting mostly of Muslims, were by and large accepting of the notion. The second slide from top is of the inauguration of the General Maud statue, and there are hundreds of people participating of all religions. A decade later, the year 1933 witnessed the erection of another equestrian statue of King Faisal I, third photo from top, and one that portrays Abdul Muhsin al-Sa'doun, Iraq's prime minister, who was a member of one of the most affluent tribes in South Iraq and had committed suicide while in office in 1929. This is the bottom photo. The statues symbolize the three pillars of early Iraqi monarchy: British command, General Stanley Maud, the Hashemite royal family, King Faisal I, and tribal power and influence, Abdul Muhsin al-Sa'doun. Statues of Maud and Faisal I were smashed and pulled down by angry crowds immediately after the revolution in 1958, marking the first act of iconoclasm in Iraq. The statue of Sa'doun survived the revolution but was looted for its worth of bronze during mayhem after the 2003 invasion. Now we reach the revolution of 1958. Shortly after the revolution in 1958, a few monuments were erected to celebrate the new Republican era, including the Arch of the Unknown Soldier by Rifat Shah Derchi architect, top left, this one. The Monument of Liberty by Jawad Salim, sculptor and Rifat Shah Derchi architect, bottom middle, this one. It is probably the most important landscape in Baghdad, landmark in Baghdad. And the mural of the Iraqi 14th of July revolution by Faiq Hassan. This is top right. During the early Republican era, monuments were made to transmit messages of solidarity, legitimacy, and authenticity of the emerging state. It promised to represent and empower underprivileged classes and segments of Iraqi society. As a result, new monuments and murals depicted ordinary women, children, farmers, laborers, etc., and addressed their aspirations. In line with the spirit of the time, soldiers were portrayed as the brave conscience of society, granting freedoms and guarding the revolution from both internal and external threats. So you see right at the heart of the Monument of Freedom, there's a soldier breaking the prison bars, and another one of this era, early revolution, with soldiers in a battle or something. Monuments of the Republic, 1969 to 1980. The 60s and 70s witnessed a surge in statues in main streets, parks, and crossroads in an attempt to beautify Baghdad and remind of past glories. Most were direct portrayal of public figures, especially poets, classical modern, also historic rulers, and statues representing tales of 1001 Nights. So you see here, top right is an Arabian knight. That was top left. Top right is a caliph from Abbasid time. His name is Al-Wathiq. The middle row is old tales from 1001 Night. From left, it is Shahrayar and Shahrazad. Shahrazad is standing and Shahrayar is lying down listening to her stories. Next to it is the story of Kahramana, also from 1001 Nights, the monument of the Jinni, and then the last one on the right is the magic carpet. Below are statues of famous poets. From left, it is Mutanabbi, then Abu Nawas, then Abdul Mahsin al-Kadhimi, then Rusafi, and Antar bin Shaddad, and there are many more. And these, each one of them belongs to a different period of time of Iraqi history. Monuments of war. At the start of the Iraq-Iran War in 1980, a number of statues and monuments were constructed in Baghdad to celebrate so-called victories and the few to mourn martyrs. Statues of Saddam Hussein in various outfits, always defiant and victorious, were dispersed throughout the country. An official count put the number in Iraq at 2,500 statues altogether. So you see top left, he's wearing military gear and waving at people. And people used to joke that he's waving for a taxi, but it was just a joke. The one underneath, he's wearing Western clothes and with a Western hat, carrying a rifle. The one at the bottom left is quite interesting. A few statues were put on top of the presidential palace, and in these he was wearing military gear, but his head was covered in a helmet that was shaped like the Dome of the Rock. We'll see it closely later. An elaborate new monument for the unknown soldier was designed by Khalid al-Rahal in 1983. This is top right, depicting the armor of a fallen warrior in state of motion. A significant piece of this period was the Monument of the Martyr by Ismail Fattah al-Turk, 1983. The second from right, consisting of an elegant split turquoise dome. It was built to memorialize thousands of young men who lost their lives in the Iran-Iraq War. The most controversial source of Qadisiyya Monument and Parade Ground by Rahal, 1989, depicts four arms. You can see, I don't know how clear it is, there are two arms here, and at the very back there are two arms. Each arm carries a sword, and every two swords are crossed. So the army would parade underneath from the first set of swords to the second set of swords. The arms were modeled on Saddam Hussein's own arms, carrying swords. These, as you can see in the bottom right. The base of each arm was covered and surrounded with hundreds of helmets of real Iranian soldiers killed in the Iraq-Iran War between 1980 and 1988. Now, the invasion. The moment of Iraq's invasion on the 9th of April 2003 was marked by the pulling down of a statue of Saddam Hussein, as millions of people watched on CNN and other satellite stations. An American soldier, surrounded by cheering Iraqi crowds, climbed up Saddam's statue at Firdaus Square all the way to the top. He first covered Saddam's head with an American flag, the top photo, but soon replaced it with an Iraqi flag, bottom left. He put a rope around the neck, and the statue was dragged using American tanks. Two photos in the middle and bottom right. The symbolism of the entire act had a very clear message to the world that Saddam Hussein's authority over Iraq and the region was finished, and so was everything he stood for. Shortly after this act of iconoclasm, hundreds of statues of Saddam Hussein were pulled down all over the country. De-Baathification of Saddam Hussein statues. A coalition provisional authority, CPA, was established in May of 2003, a few weeks after the invasion and declaration of Iraq under occupation, led by Paul Bremer. The CPA was responsible for running the country during the transitional period, and Mr. Bremer had complete legislative and executive authorities. The first memorandum of the CPA was the De-Baathification of Iraqi society, followed by a number of other memorandums, mostly to do with expelling members of the Ba'ath Party from civil service, seizing their assets, founding a De-Baathification Commission, and dismantling armed and security forces. I found no clear provisions for removing icons. Nevertheless, around 2,500 statues of Saddam Hussein and the Ba'ath Party were pulled down all over the country by both American troops and enthusiastic crowds. Very few ended in museums or stored safely. Most of the fallen statues were either melted or sold as whole or parts in auctions, the head fetching the highest price. The photo on top shows Saddam Hussein wearing Arabian outfit and with crowds trying to knock it down. The middle one is the statues that were on top of the presidential palace. They were taken down by Americans. You can see American soldiers walking in front. And this is the helmet that Saddam Hussein was wearing, which recalls the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. The bottom, some people were trying to set the statue on fire. Now you can see from the scale of people how large these monuments were. They were quite large and all solid bronze, which is quite expensive. De-Baathification of art unrelated to the Ba'ath Party. An Iraqi De-Baathification Commission was formed after the end of the occupation in 2005, responsible for removing high-ranking members and all references to the Ba'ath Party. Guidelines for demolishing statues and monuments were not so clear. Most statues of Saddam Hussein and Ba'ath Party members had by now already been removed. However, the Commission took upon itself removing monuments with disputed links or references to the Ba'ath Party. The Embrace Monument by Dr. Ala Bashir, top left, portrayed two interlocking figures in abstract form, with no clear reference to the Ba'ath Party. However, the De-Baathification Commission's interpretation was quite overstretched, claiming that it represented Saddam embracing the Iraqi population. The monument was completely demolished, as you can see, bottom left. The Masira Monument by Khalid Rahal, top right, located opposite the Iraqi National Museum, told the story of civilization from ancient Mesopotamia to present, displayed in figures wearing costumes for every period. So you can see people here, and each one of them is wearing a costume of a certain period in Iraqi history. It was removed under the pretext that one of the figures looked quite similar to Saddam Hussein, as you see in the middle right hand. The Prisoner of War Monument told the story of Iraqi soldiers captured by Iranians during the Iran-Iraq War. The artwork was removed, yet the back wall was later used for a different monument that we will discuss in a later slide. Accommodation and transformation. Thankfully, not all monuments were removed. Faced by both public outrage and stately needs, the De-Baathification Commission eventually took a wiser approach. Instead of removing monuments, a new policy was put in place to accommodate them. Many attempts were made to remove the monument of the Swords of Qadisiyah. We already talked about it. And here, the top left photo. However, the Iraqi army had no alternative parade ground to celebrate Army Day and other military occasions. A decision was made to keep the monument and continue its use, yet the helmets of dead Iranian soldiers were removed, thank God. The attempts to demolish the monument of martyrs came to an end with the idea of transforming the interpretation of its symbolism from martyrs of the Iran-Iraq War to those of the Ba'ath regime. Names of tens of thousands of Iraqi soldiers killed in the war, previously etched on its walls, were removed. The monument and all its annexes became property of the Martyrs Commission, responsible for persons killed under the Ba'ath regime. Now, this is my favorite, the bottom left. A witty approach was used in dealing with the equestrian statue of Salahuddin, located in northwest Baghdad on the road to the province named after him. Salahuddin was a Kurdish warrior in the Middle Ages. He fought against the Crusades and was also responsible for defeating the Fatimid Shia reign in Egypt, and therefore despised by some. Instead of removing the statue, it was very simply renamed after Malik al-Ashtar, a close friend and confidant of Imam Ali, and no one would know. Islamization of public space. Having rid Iraq of tyranny that had lasted several decades, Iraqis found themselves in a new state order based on ethno-religious affiliations. Religious parties, like the rest of the opposition before 2003, were heavily oppressed under Saddam's regime. Once Saddam was removed, elections brought political Islamic parties to power through a questionable electoral system. Dozens of religious parties compete in every election and over acquisition of public space. This rivalry is not confined between the two sects, but also within each sect. With an unquestionable majority of Shia among the population, some political parties took stride to Shiitize public space in Baghdad in order to serve political purposes and acquire mass support. For instance, a mural for nationalization of oil at Airport Road was removed, and the wall behind it used for an artwork portraying Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, this is top left, Hussein in 1980 for their role in politics and publicly supporting the Islamic Revolution in Iran. The monument of Al-Ghadir was set on a wall that once housed the prisoner of war monument. We already talked about the prisoner of war monument. Al-Ghadir relates to the last speech given by Prophet Muhammad before his death and was interpreted differently by each of the two Islamic sects. It is extremely controversial. The Al-Ghadir is extremely controversial as it lays deep in the heart of sectarian conflict. Posters of political and religious leaders have replaced statues and murals that Saddam once occupied. Quite a few transmit messages of religious and sectarian nature. During elections, barely a lamppost is free of posters of candidates from all walks of life. It must be noted that no political party represents an entire sector or ethnicity. This is made clear by the refusal of the majority of the population to take part in elections with a percentage nearing 80% of people from various religious and ethnic backgrounds. So these are some of the posters. The one on the right portrays Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis and General Qasim Soleimani. Both were killed by the Americans using a targeted missile. Next to them is the two Sadrs, Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr and Sayyid Muhammad Sadiq al-Sadr, who were both killed by Saddam, surrounded by martyrs, and greeting them two holy persons. We don't see the faces, just the back of them. It's probably some of the imams. This is just an example. The case of Abu Ja'far al-Mansur. A statue of Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, who lived between 714 AD to 775 AD, by Khalid al-Rahal sculptor, stands in the suburb named after him in West Baghdad. Al-Mansur was the second Abbasid caliph and the founder of Baghdad. This is the reason why he has a statue. He was the founder of Baghdad, which was built between 762 and 766 AD, which was over 1,300 years ago. Baghdad woke up to an explosion one morning back in 2005, committed by a group of militants that had completely destroyed the base of the statue and caused damage to the statue itself, bottom left. In a loosely based narrative, Harun al-Rashid, the grandson of al-Mansur, had poisoned Imam Musa al-Kadhim, the seventh Imam, in 799 AD. Imam al-Kadhim is deeply revered by followers of both sects of Islam. However, the manner of his death remains a point of dispute between them. The mayoralty of Baghdad had a statue and base restored, and it was unveiled again in 2008. However, on the day of his death every year, small groups of extremists go out and protest, demanding its removal. On a number of occasions, security forces had to interfere to protect it. Its survival remains threatened to this day. The Baghdadification of Baghdad. Baghdad is a city that cherishes its monuments despite all the destruction. Debates on classic and social media are always pretty lively, with criticism at the removal or installment of any monument. The mayoralty of Baghdad continues to put up new statues, mostly recalling ideas of the 70s, and portraying public figures, poets, and statues representing tales of 1,001 nights. In preparation to celebrate Baghdad as the capital of Arab culture in 2013, the late Muhammad Ghani Hikmet, sculptor, was assigned to building 4 monuments in Baghdad that called for national unity and rejecting destruction of Iraq's memory and heritage. Funds were also made available to restore some of Baghdad's most important landmarks, like the Monument of Liberty, which had been neglected for many decades. The picture in the middle bottom shows the renovation of the Monument of Liberty while under construction, and now it's finished, and it really is a very good, they made a very good job. And the rest are monuments made by Muhammad Ghani Hikmet in 2013. The one on the bottom left is the magic lantern, again, 1,001 nights. Due to lack of funds, the mayoralty of Baghdad had to resort to graffiti sometimes to celebrate national and international figures. Wujdan al-Majid, artist, was assigned to painting celebrities on pillars that once bore a railway track. The figures at the railway track no longer exists, but the pillars are already there. The figures included famous architects, artists, archaeologists, poets, scholars, and scientists. Mother Teresa was also featured on one of the pillars. From top left, we have Taha Hussein, scholar, Egyptian scholar, and he was the Minister of Education. Under him, Rosalind would recognize the name, is Taha Baqir, the father of archaeologists in Iraq. Under him is the famous poet Mullah Aboud al-Karhi, and under him is the famous Muzaffar al-Nawab. Next to him is Jawad Salim, very famous artist. Next to him is Nazik al-Malaika, pioneer of modern Arab poetry. Top right, everyone knows her, Zaha Hadid. Under is Picasso, Pablo Picasso. Under Picasso is Dr. Muhammad Makiya, a very famous Iraqi, Baghdadi architect. And bottom right in the corner is a graffiti of Mother Teresa. People's art after 2003. Lack of state control, coupled with low cost of synthetic materials and availability of 3D printers, made statues easy to make and install anywhere in the city. People started making their own statues, reflecting individual dreams and admirations to be exhibited in public space. Some were so outrageously distasteful or out of proportion that came close to an insult and had to be removed. However, most were well-intentioned and serve as a reminder of accomplished people they represent. The phenomena reflects recognition of the role of arts in spreading information and knowledge, and understanding of the importance of public monuments in reflecting society's needs and desires. Now, the photo on bottom right is a good example of kitsch. It is the famous poet Jawahiri surrounded by coffee cups and coffee pots, symbolizing Arabic or Arabism or something. But my favorite is the one next to it. This statue lives just down the road from me. This is a guy who died. His best friend lives in the mansion behind the statue. So he made a statue of his best friend and put it in front of his mansion for people to remember him. I think it's cute. Graffiti as the monument of inclusiveness by the young. Millions of boys and girls took to the streets in Baghdad and southern provinces in October 2019, demanding political reforms and justice under the slogan, "We want a homeland." Peaceful protests lasted several months and hundreds of lives were unjustifiably lost. Protesters expressed their losses and aspirations through graffiti, as well as other forms of art like poetry, music, cinema, and theater. Most of the protesters belonged to the Shia sect and expressed themselves using symbolisms derived from that culture. However, I strongly disagree with the notion that their graffiti was part of the Shiatization of Baghdad, claimed by some. The inclusive nature of expression reflects a diverse generation united in a dream of a better future. Safa al-Sarraj, nicknamed Ibn Thinwa after his mother, became an icon of the protests after he was killed when a gas bomb, flared by security forces, landed on his head. He was portrayed in much of the graffiti in images that relate him to religious martyrs like Imam Hussein and Jesus Christ. Top left slide shows him in a crown of thrones, very much portraying Jesus Christ. The one underneath it, he's in a halo, his head is in a halo, and very much like Imam Hussein. Well, these are some of the slides of pictures of graffiti. The one on the top right refuses sectarianism. A third on the right from top is about empowering women and things like that. So it's quite inclusive in it. Everyone. Many societies throughout history have witnessed acts of iconoclasm during turbulent periods, from Roman times to the George Floyd protests in 2020. Statues were seen to glorify a past which was not always so pleasant to some. Collective memory is not always harmonious, and what some regard an act of heroism could have been traumatic to others. Destroying the past or parts of it needs to be coupled with an all-inclusive vision of the future as a binding force with common interests within a serious nation-building effort. Iraq has lost much of its heritage to terrorism, illicit trafficking, de-Baathification, ignorance, or neglect. With that loss, many communities with a long history on the land have completely disappeared or are rapidly diminishing. Nevertheless, far more remains to be protected and cherished. A number of forces inside and outside Iraq are competing over public space in Baghdad in order to claim dominance, spread their ideas, and win support of the masses. This study has shown rivaling tides that intend to either Islamize, Baghdadify, popularize, or energize public space with emerging visions of new generations. As the protests in 2019 have clearly illustrated, Iraq is in need of an inclusive political system that defies social, religious, ethnic, and gender inequalities. Historic and religious schisms could be deferred until such time when it is less sacrosanct and could be debated scientifically and sensibly. Public sculptures and monuments could be a powerful tool in spreading this message. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maysoon. That was wonderful. I think that I've seen one question so far, but let me sort of kick off with a question on a practical side. How or where were the enormous bronze statues cast? I can remember Nuha Aradi having to go out to Italy when she was doing a ceramic structure or mural that she had. There were no kilns big enough in Baghdad for that sort of thing. I just wondered if Saddam had imported.
Yes, the big stuff was made in Italy, most of it, as far as I know. But there are kilns in Iraq. I mean, there is one that belongs to the Ministry of Culture. And I think after the sanctions in 1990, Iraq had its statues made in the Iraqi crown.
Right.
But for that, it was mostly in Italy.
Which must have added to the cost of the structure.
And you know, it was moved to the museum to be kept there, and they couldn't put it on trailers, so they had to cut it into parts, you know, to be able to move it. So how on earth did they bring it? I don't know. Maybe helicopters, or God knows. I don't know
Gosh,
how.
it's a major logistical nightmare. Anyway, let me. There's one question from Ahmed Tabakchali. When is the book coming out?
What book?
Well, I assume the book on this topic of this Baghdad sculptures or public art.
Well, I've already written it in Arabic. I'm hoping to have it done in English. But I'm busy with my memoirs at the moment. Maybe next year I'll be able to work more seriously on that in English.
Well, that would be great. Ashley Barlow writes, do channels exist for artists to submit designs, or do the government issue calls for proposals?
Yeah, they issue calls for proposals usually. The government, local governments, and the government itself. And sometimes they ask particular artists to do if they're in a hurry, if there's no time for a competition and all that. But I mean, since 2013, really no major work has taken place. It is mostly statues of persons, either killed or, you know, or famous people with a statue of them, just them standing there.
Or
Nothing major.
like your neighbor's
Like my
friend.
like my neighbor's best friend. Yeah, exactly.
From Sharif Fauzi, what do you see as the biggest threat to Iraq's cultural development? Loaded question there.
Yeah. I would say ignorance and lack of funds. There is still a lot of ignorance of the importance of cultural heritage. Everything. I mean, we're talking antiquities, music, art, everything. we still don't have, for instance, we still don't have proper data of what is in the museum, what's in the National Museum and other museums like arts and all this. And there's no reason for it, except, in my opinion, is ignorance on one hand and lack of funds on the other. I mean, we had the biggest threat was ISIS, Daesh a few years ago.
Yes.
It's finished now. Yeah.
Thank goodness. Lots of questions are now coming in. Louisa Macmillan writes, do you know what has happened to the Iran-Iraq soldier sculptures that were once on the banks of the Shatt al-Arab in Basra?
No, I have no idea. I have a feeling they were thrown into the river or probably melted, but I really don't know. That's why I try to concentrate on Baghdad. I know more about Baghdad than other provinces. And it's hard to find the information there. I mean, in Baghdad, there are people and places you can get information from, but it's very difficult in the provinces.
Mm.
I mean, there was a war against the British in 1941 when Iraq lost.
The Gailani.
Rashid Ali Gailani, and there were 4 statues of the military officers who fought against the British, and they were all executed in the end. These were removed. I mean, they were not. It's before the Ba'ath and before Saddam and before Ba'ath was even formed, as a party or as a political party. So it must have been I suspect it was for the bronze,
Yes.
and the bronze used for other stuff.
Well, you can't blame them, really. I mean, it's a good material. Faisal Kadri has written, regarding the statue of Salahuddin turned to Malik al-Ashtar, the horse raising both front feet, which symbolizes death or died in action. Did either Salahuddin or al-Ashtar die in action?
Oh, I have no idea. This is a historic question.
Exactly. I don't think Salahuddin did.
Salah, I don't know how he died. But not in war. We would have heard about it, but I don't know.
And Ashley Barlow writes, where do you see the role of the private sector in rehabilitation of public art?
Well, we have something called the Union of Banks or something, banks work together and they give some funds for beautifying Baghdad, but really um, they need to be guided where to go. I mean, they don't necessarily know what to do with the money. And usually it is just artwork. I mean, I haven't shown everything in Baghdad. There are hundreds of statues in Baghdad. And some of their work was to just conserve some art, some piece of art. But most of it is new work, which is really not worth mentioning. And they spend the money, but they need to have good guidance.
Right. Well, I mean, if you're in the Balladeer or something, there's no reason why you should be an art expert. Hamid El-Kifai again. I find it funny that the name of Salahuddin was removed from his statue north of Baghdad and replaced by Malik al-Ashtar. Did they look alike to the point that there was no need to make any alterations to the statue?
I don't think there are any photos of them.
Exactly.
And who knows? Who knows what Salah ad-Din looked like or what Malik al-Ashtar looked like? So just changing the name. It's better than removing the sculpture. Just change the name. I'm okay with it personally.
And a question from your cousin Samar. What became of the many monuments destroyed or lifted by ISIS in Mosul and Assyrian heritage? And what of the architecture? Did it suffer the same threat and acts of destruction similar to monuments, excluding Saddam's palaces?
Well, in many cases, Limassol was destroyed, but the stones were kept in place. Hopefully, they will be able to put it together as a Limassol once again. but some of the ziggurats were completely removed. I mean, a lot of damage was done.
Mm.
The museum is now working. Architecture was totally destroyed, but UNESCO did a good job actually putting back about 150 houses, traditional houses on the right bank, exactly the way it was. And the architects from Mosul worked on it, young architects, and I visited them a couple of times. They were very keen to build it exactly the way it was. I mean, sometimes the craftsmanship doesn't exist anymore, or materials doesn't exist anymore, but they go out of their way to try to get it. And some houses are extremely hard to live in. I mean, I saw a house which is about 3 meters by 3 meters, and it's on 3 or 4 stories, and there's a staircase in this space. And
Gosh.
how they lived, I have no idea. But the architects were keen to have it exactly the way it was, not to change it. And Mosul is building itself. I'm optimistic about Mosul, really, and people there want to feel pride of having their city back.
Mm.
And so it is, I mean, with the help of the international community, I must admit, but it is the people who are doing most of the work. Yeah.
That's great. And going on to Haidel Shakari, with the recent huge infrastructure projects in Iraq, is there any focus on cultural or artistic projects? And is there any cultural artistic trend emerging in Baghdad's public spaces? I think you probably have rather answered that already.
I have, but I'll add one thing. The Prime Minister Sudani is keen on naming the new projects after uh, scholars and artists. Like a new bridge was named after Faiq Hassan, the artist,
Oh.
and there's a new housing project after Ali Wardi, who's a famous sociologist. So it is nice, I mean, to recall these figures. He seems to be aware of them, which is good.
Has anything after Rifat or not?
Nothing,
Attitude,
not,
nothing.
not yet.
Susan, I don't know whether it's Wict or Vict. What do you think of Saddam Hussein's modernization of Babylon?
Oh, yeah.
Shock.
Well, God, we we managed to get finally Iraq managed to get Babylon as a World Heritage Site. It affected it. Um, but the good thing is that you can tell the old bricks from the new bricks because he used completely different bricks. So you can tell that, this is where he interfered and this is where he didn't interfere. And Babylon remains a great source of inspiration. I mean, Babylon was the heart of the world, the New York or London of today. So, regardless of what Saddam did, and he did a lot of damage, building his palace on top of one of the mounds and all this, but Babylon remains a site to visit.
And it's not too far from Baghdad. It's with
That's all.
um, this is slightly repetitive. Elizabeth Kwan, can you say anything about the afterlives of statue parts of Saddam Hussein? What that remained once they were taken out of the public domain and into private spaces?
Well, as I said, very few went to the museum, but most were either melted and the people used the bronze, or they were taken abroad and sold in auctions. Sometimes they sold, and this is the arm of Saddam, of a statue of Saddam, or the leg, or the bottom. Even the bottom was so. But it was always the head that got the. Yeah.
And Zaid Issam, for statues removed by or under the supervision of the US military, are there any official reports, photos perhaps, or even lists?
Oh, yeah, well, they were taken to the Iraqi museum, so I would say that the Iraqi museum has this.
As
These
a
people.
list? And Amar Hermes writes, do you think, Maysoon, the differentiating politically induced non-political art would give us a better insight into the cultural value of art in Baghdad?
Oh, I think art is very much connected to politics. I don't think, especially public art, it is very difficult to disengage, art from politics. Always there's someone who funds this piece of art, and there is a reason why they would fund this piece of art. It is to send a message to the people.
Mm.
That's why it's in public. Otherwise, they would put it in their swimming pool or backyard or something. So I think it is very much interconnected, politics and art. I don't think they can separate.
And one inspires the other.
Yes.
Ala Shami writes, since there is zero interest from the Iraqi officials to maintain the heritage of Iraqi arts, are there any activities from the abroad Iraqis as yourself towards maintain or reserve this heritage?
I'm in Baghdad. The question is addressed to me.
Yes.
I am in Baghdad. Secondly, it's not true that there's no interest at all. I spoke about the Monument of Liberty. It was actually extremely well maintained. I visited it several times during construction. Of course, a lot needs to be done. I agree with that. But hopefully, with the abundance of budget, some of it will be allocated uh, to maintaining and making new works of art.
Right. Well, there are no more questions.
Yes.
So I think that just leaves me to say, give you a big, big thank you for a fascinating tour of Baghdad's monuments sort of before and after.
Ah,
And we look
thank
forward to your book.
Thank you very much.
Thank
That's
you.
great.
Anyway, sort of big clap.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.